What's up, guys? Coach B here today, coming back with another vid. Gonna talk a little bit today about something that I've had a ton of clients ask me about, especially kind of people who are newer to the world of bodybuilding or even lifestyle clients. And one of the supplements I put a lot of my clients on is essential amino acids. So today we're gonna talk about the great amino acid debate, BCAAs versus EAAs, and why I personally prefer to use EAAs when asking a client to supplement with something. I'm going to give you some insight behind what exactly they are, both of them, and why exactly I personally believe, and studies have shown, that an EAA is a superior choice instead of a BCAA. All right, so let's hop into it. So first of all, let's define kind of what EAAs, BCAAs are. So both of them supply amino acids. What is an amino acid? An amino acid is the building blocks of protein. Protein, as we know, is muscle tissue. So essentially we need amino acids to build muscle. There's 20 amino acids that make up proteins. 11 of those 20 can be synthesized or made up by our body, meaning there's 9 which can't. Hint, hint, 9 which cannot be made by the body. So in order to build tissue, we need those other 9 to be supplied. Now those can be supplied via diet, supplementation, meat sources. Whole meat sources are very, very good sources of essential amino acids, and that's generally where we get most of our EAAs, or the 9 that we can't produce, from. So in terms of the amino acids, what is a branched chain amino acid? A branched chain amino acid contains 3 amino acids. It contains isoleucine, valine, and L-leucine. And then on the flip side, what is an EAA? Well, an essential amino acid has all 9 amino acids that we cannot produce ourselves. So it's going to supply you with not only the branched chain amino acids, the isoleucine, valine, and leucine, it's also going to provide you with 6 others like tryptophan, phenylalanine, histidine. There's 6 others that it's going to provide on top of the 3 that are already provided by a branched chain amino acid. So if we look at that on a basic level already, if you're looking and debating between a BCAA and an EAA, well, an EAA is already going to contain what a BCAA contains. So in that sense, why would a BCAA be better if an EAA has it in it? And that's not my argument. That's just a simple point I wanted to make. So something else we have to think about, and that's the contributing factor to this entire thing, is what we call muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown. Now, when we look at the two, muscle protein synthesis is essentially what we call anabolism, or the building of proteins. And muscle protein breakdown is what we call catabolism, or the breaking down of proteins. So these two, MPB and MPS, muscle protein breakdown and muscle protein synthesis, are always at play. Obviously, in a perfect world, what we would want to see, is muscle protein breakdown zeroed out, with muscle protein synthesis maxed out. Now, we can't do that. Muscle protein breakdown will always be prevalent, and muscle protein synthesis will always be prevalent. So what we want to do is favor that in terms of maximize the gap between muscle protein breakdown and muscle protein synthesis. Now, we need to also consider that in order to fully maximize muscle protein synthesis, the body likes homeostasis. So we need to let it come back to a baseline. We can't continually stimulate muscle protein synthesis all day, every day. So I know some of you watching this may have done it. You fill your 2-liter mammoth mug or your big water jug, milk jug, with a couple scoops of BCAAs, because Rich Piana said so. Rest in peace, Rich Piana. and you sip on it all day because that's what's going to make you build muscle. Unfortunately, that's not really how it works. If you are continually sipping on that, yes, you're essentially going to be stimulating muscle protein synthesis, but if you overstimulate muscle protein synthesis, you actually inhibit the effects of maximizing it. So you're essentially preventing yourself from reaching a fully maximized muscle protein synthesis and holding back on the benefit you're going to get from that. So don't sip on your BCAAs all day, or EAAs, whatever it is. Use them as they should be. If you're eating whole food meals a few times a day, whether it's 3, 4, 5 times a day, at each meal, and given the fact you have adequate protein at that meal, you're gonna maximize muscle protein synthesis. Let's say you're eating 160 or 190 grams of chicken. You're gonna be getting that 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine you need to maximize muscle protein synthesis. So if you're gonna sip on a BCA between those meals, it's probably not ideal. All right, guys, sorry, got a little distracted with my little rant about not sipping on BCAAs throughout the day. We'll get back to our main point here. So a simple way to look at the muscle building process is via something called the mTOR pathway. When we signal and stimulate the mTOR pathway, it actually signals cell growth and aka muscle anabolism or hypertrophy by increasing muscle protein synthesis, which we just talked about. Our goal in building muscle is to maximize muscle protein synthesis. So when we turn on and stimulate that mTOR pathway, that's essentially what we're doing, is we're increasing muscle protein synthesis. So essentially, wink, wink, essentially, I'm cheesy as hell, I know. mTOR is exactly what turns on the muscle building process. So in both EAAs and BCAAs, we have an amino acid called L-leucine present. L-leucine is actually the amino acid which turns on and signals that mTOR pathway that we're talking about. So you need leucine to actually start the muscle building process. So Braden, why are you telling me EAAs are better than BCAAs then, if BCAAs contain leucine, which is going to turn on that muscle building pathway or process via mTOR? So basically, BCAAs contain leucine. They contain enough leucine to turn on the muscle building process. They do not have adequate amino acids to sustain that muscle building process. Some studies have actually shown that if you do not have adequate amino acids and you're not supplying those essential amino acids, all 9, to aid this process, and you're only supplying 3, your body is gonna scavenge and break down tissue to supply itself with the other 6. Now, there is some arguments that can be made here. People will say, well, if you've eaten sufficient protein throughout the day, you will have adequate amino acids in your bloodstream that you can pull from and supply those other 6. I'm not going to argue that, absolutely. But what we're trying to do when we're in the gym is give ourselves the absolute best chance at building the most amount of muscle possible. So when we think about that, if we can just supply those 6 amino acids and prevent the body from having to find them and utilize those, and we just supply them straight up, in my opinion, it's going to be a better route. So an EAA is actually going to provide the other 6 amino acids that we need, and therefore if we look at the MPB and MPS cycle, supplying those 9 amino acids versus supplying those 3 is going to further that gap we talked about between muscle protein breakdown and muscle protein synthesis. Because if by chance our body has to break down muscle proteins to get those other 6, well, we're going to close that gap. Now, if we don't allow that to happen and we don't have that breakdown happening, but we're actually giving it the other 6 that we need, now we're going to see that gap increase. So we're going to favor anabolism or muscle protein synthesis. Now, I've seen other people talk about this. I've read articles about this. I know John Meadows has spoken about this before and uses the analogy about a car and fuel. You can turn a car on, BCAAs, but you need fuel to get somewhere, EAAs. Very good analogy. I have my own I use with clients. I find it makes a lot of sense. So essentially, if we think about this analogy, it kind of will spell out this whole process. So let's say you're in a pitch black room and there's a 1,000-piece puzzle on the table, tiny, tiny little pieces, and you can't make out the picture, what's on the puzzle, because, well, quite simply, it's a black room. Now, there's a light switch on the wall. That light switch has a dimmer. Okay, actually, you know what? Let me draw this out quick here. Don't make fun of my art skills. All right. There is our light switch, and it's completely backwards, but you get the idea. So there's a switch with on off, and there's a dimmer. If we have the dimmer set all the way to the bottom, and we turn that light switch on, okay, so when we look at this analogy, what is the light switch? The light switch, the on-off button, is our mTOR pathway. So we turn on that button, we signal the muscle building process. Now go back to the puzzle analogy, we're in a room, the light turns on. If that dimmer is all the way at the bottom, the room is still going to be quite dim. Now with a 1,000-piece puzzle, it's very sophisticated, and we're still going to have a tough time making out the actual image to start laying the pieces. So if we leave that dimmer at the bottom position, we're going to call that BCAAs. It is still possible to build the puzzle. Is it the most efficient way? No, it's going to take a lot longer. It's definitely not going to speed up the process or aid the process in building that puzzle. Just like a BCAA will not do so in building muscle. Now, if we have the top as an EAA, we're supplying those other 6 amino acids. We're giving the body what it needs to build tissue. We're giving it every amino acid it needs to build tissue. It has the 11 already, it needs another 9. We're supplying those 9 as we're training and breaking down that muscle tissue. Now, if we move that light switch all the way up, that room is going to be bright. I'm sitting in a bright room right now. If I had a puzzle on this table, I'd be able to make out what pieces they were. Now, granted, I can't say I've done a lot of 1,000-piece puzzles. I don't know if I'd actually be able to do it, but you get the idea. So if we have a 1,000-piece puzzle, we have a light switch and the dimmer. Bottom position is a BCA. We give it leucine, so we turn on that light switch. We've signaled our mTOR pathway. A BCA will still allow you to build muscle. It's not going to prevent you from building muscle. Is it going to help you build the most amount of muscle possible by maximizing muscle protein synthesis? No. Turn that dimmer up to the top. That's where the EAA is. We're giving it all 9 amino acids that are required for our body on top of the 11 it can already make to build muscle tissue. You now have an efficient muscle building process. You've given it what it needs. Muscle building process is as efficient as it can go. So we step in the gym, we are drinking our EAAs, maybe we drink them on the way in, maybe we drink them 20 minutes before, maybe we sip on them during. That's gonna maximize the muscle building process by stimulating MPS, muscle protein synthesis, turning on that mTOR pathway, and we're doing it as efficiently as possible. So now you're gonna have some people argue, well, why wouldn't we just use a fast digesting protein then, like whey isolate? So when you ingest something like whey isolate, it's still gonna have to be digested in your stomach. So essentially, you will have blood going to your stomach to digest these nutrients at the time you're training. When we're training, we want blood assimilating nutrients to our muscles. We want blood carrying nutrients that are already digested and broken down to our muscles, supplying those nutrients so that we're repairing and aiding the muscle building process immediately. If we're ingesting a food source or a whole protein like a whey isolate, it still needs to, even though it's fast absorbing and fast digesting, it still needs to get digested and broken down in our stomach. So we're going to be transporting blood to our stomach to aid in the digestion process rather than assimilating that blood to the muscles and moving nutrients to the muscles. Some studies have actually shown that EAAs can actually have an impact on anabolism and muscle hypertrophy as well as whey isolate does. So that right there just is a simple fact to show that I'm not shutting down anyone. Like I know like Pepto Pro and some of these casein hydrolysates are really good and they're very fast digesting. They've been used and talked about in the past. I'm not going to go there. I'm just talking about simply what most of us know and use for protein powders, whether it's a whey protein concentrate, whey protein isolate. If you're using an amino acid product to benefit your muscle growth, I'm a firm believer you're going to get a lot farther by ingesting an EAA at the time or just before training than you would a whey isolate for the reasons just stated. So our final consensus. What do we think is better for building muscle? EAAs, BCAAs. I believe EAAs, my clients and myself, I use an EAA over a BCAA because we're going to supply all 9 amino acids that our body cannot create itself or synthesize itself. It's going to be very, very fast digesting. We're still getting the benefits of leucine that you would get from a branched chain amino acid. However, we're actually going to prevent our body from searching and breaking down any other proteins to source those other 6 amino acids from by supplying them. That's basically where I'm at. I believe EAAs are superior for this reason. Is it going to be an absolutely huge difference? I can't say. I haven't ran studies myself or seen them myself in bodybuilders or people concerned with building the most amount of muscle possible and having 2 control groups, one using an essential amino acid, one using a branched chain amino acid. These people are going to have different genetics. I've never seen it and I can't say how big of a difference it'll be, but I think our goal is to give us the tools to maximize our abilities to build muscle. And in doing that, I am confident to say you're going to be better off using an essential amino acid over a branched chain amino acid. So when we're choosing an EAA, what do we want to look for? Well, studies have shown that to maximize muscle protein synthesis, you need about 2.5 grams of leucine. Leucine is still very important, and it is in both EAAs and BCAAs. So if you have BCAAs, I'm not saying throw them out. If they have trace amounts of leucine, throw them out. If you have a minimum 2.5 grams of leucine, I recommend all my clients find an essential amino acid product that has about 3 grams of leucine in it. This is perfect. This is what you need to maximize muscle protein synthesis, and that is going to do the job of turning on that muscle building process and helping your ability to build lean tissue.